of the Second World War, the UN gave Israel back to the Jewish people as penance for what happened during the Second World War. It was originally Palestine, so now all the Palestinian people and the Israelites fight over who owns and who rightfully has ownership of Israel itself. The West Bank, as you can see, is outlined in the lighter yellow, is primarily Palestinian. It's not very safe for Jewish people to go there. I didn't travel there while I was in Israel. But then also Gaza City, which you probably heard about in the news, is occupied by a rebel Palestinian group called Hamas. Hamas is an incredibly violent group. They often fire on the Jewish people as for sport, pretty much. They'll use rockets that explode in the air. It's often shot down by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. If you don't know, Israel has a mandated service for all the Jewish people once they turn 18, man or woman. They're all forced to go into the army or do some kind of service for Israel. But right now, Gaza is fighting against the IDF. So basically what they'll do is they'll send up helium balloons that often explode in the air and then will rain down on crops or just territories and will totally damage all of the areas, and they'll often shoot rockets towards Israel, if you can see, it's very far south, so they'll shoot north towards Ashkelon, where I was for most of it. For a month before I left for Israel, I was not allowed to go because it was too dangerous for anybody coming over, really Americans, to go over there because we were targets. From Gaza to Ashkelon, it's only about 7 miles. That's about how long it takes me to get to school. It's probably about a 20-minute drive. It's very, very close. So that's the situation there. As people living in the United States, we must understand that our notion of peace is relative. We are fortunate enough to have grown up in a time in our country where domestic calm is a guarantee. It is not a forefront wish. We hope for interpersonal calm in our jobs, in our relationships, in our communities. The point I'm trying to make is that as an American, your own personal narrative regarding peace does not stretch to cover your country. It simply doesn't need to. This summer, I spent two weeks in Israel. I was so unaware of the reality of the lives that people grow up in day-to-day danger. I went in with such a sense of naivety. I walked out with a greater appreciation of my upbringing and how lucky I've been to grow up in a country without war. I can't change how I used to think about peace and my life, but I can hope to understand the experience that changed my life, and I can share my experience to hopefully broaden our collective understanding. I was in a boarding school working with a program called Ultimate Peace. Ultimate Peace is a nonprofit that brings together children from Arab, Palestinian, and Jewish communities to play Ultimate together to create bonding and understanding between groups that would otherwise never interact. My role as an American was as a leader in training in a very small group of Americans. I will continue to tell you about 2 days that changed my life. The first day was possibly the best day of my life. The job I had as an American LIT was to coach a group of 12 girls how to play Ultimate. The group I had been given was a tough group to overcome. There are huge cultural differences between the two types of girls, Arab and Jewish. The Jewish girls tend to stick together. The Jewish girls I had were very talkative, but only in Hebrew with other Hebrew speakers. The Arab girls tend to be more timid and reserved in most everything that they do. As all groups are with Ultimate Peace, my group was an even mix between the two groups. It wasn't until the third day that we got the girls to interact more than just passing the disc and running with each other. It was a particularly hot day, but for some reason it didn't seem to bother them. They were laughing and cheering for each other as more than just teammates, but as friends playing Ultimate. They looked as any other youth team. That day at dinner, I realized that this day was what I had been hoping for. The happiness I was surrounded with at dinner was all I could have asked of my group, I remember thinking. All the work I had done to get to Israel, and with my team itself, was worth it for this day. The following day was the most terrifying day of my entire life. Before I tell you, I want to emphasize here that fear is relative. An experience to one person is not the same as it is to another. Your fear in any situation is completely unique. As a person growing up in Atlanta, I don't feel fear day to day. You might too. However, the person next to you may live with more fear. Their narrative might be much different. Before I continue, I want to acknowledge the privileges I have been given by being who I am. I live in a safe neighborhood, I don't have to worry about my family being deported, and I don't fear for my safety when I call the police. I want you to understand that I know my experiences are not everyone's, and you might have more fear in your life than I do. But fear is fear, and it affects us all, no matter how big a part it plays in your life. It is part of your own personal story. Your response to fear is part of who you are. Now back to the story. I was walking around the dining hall at breakfast with one of the founders of UP, David Barkin, called one coach from every team over him. As I walked past, I watched their concerned faces and heard the word sirens. I didn't think much of it. Siren mishaps had happened before. A few moments later, one of my fellow coaches called me over and told me that 30 rockets were fired during the night, a bomb had exploded, and a siren had went off. I would show you a map, but I don't have one. They kept details vague as to not overwhelm and make us more freaked out, but I know it was close enough that the people staying in the dorms farther south were woken up by a siren coming from the city in the middle of the night. We were told a bomb had exploded in Ashkelon, which doesn't mean that much to hearing it now, but when I got off the train to go to camp, it was a 10-minute walk from Ashkelon to camp. It is closer than here to Emory Village. As someone growing up in the States, I was hugely underprepared for a terror threat. It is a terrible, powerless feeling to feel threatened by something you can't stop. It is hard to put into words. That morning, I made a conscious choice. I could not let the girls I was coaching see me sweat. I quickly put on a brave face and pushed my fear down to have the best day that I could make possible. Later in the day, sometime after lunch, my team and several others were at the pool. I began to hear a low rumble in the distance, and I assumed it was heat thunder. For a little while, I could hear it, and I was unbothered by it. It's like 90 degrees every day, so I assumed it was heat thunder, and that's not a bad guess. I watched as all the important people from UP gathered at the pool, and I knew something was wrong. Someone tells me it's an explosive sound, and I realize it's the sound of Hamas rockets being shot down by the Israeli Air Defense Force known as Iron Dome. People in the pool keep playing as I look to the distance, wondering if I will see an explosion. The rumble continues and it gets more frequent. Every 2 minutes, every minute, every 30 seconds, every 15. It starts to sound closer. Counselors tell us to get everyone out of the pool and into their dorm rooms 15 minutes early. The girls are moving incredibly slow, and I feel myself growing steadily more anxious as we're the last ones leaving the pool. The girls don't seem to notice the rumble as I jump every time it booms in the distance. I make the girls hurry to their rooms, but only after one of them has asked me what the rumbling is, and I lied and said it was heat thunder. Why did I lie? It took me a month of reflecting on this, that my privilege had reared its head. I realized in a split second that I would fly home and I would leave this fear behind. In a week's time, it would be a memory, and my life would continue on as normal, largely unaffected in the long run. I can't do anything to stop the violence, but I can lie to protect this child for a short time. Let me bear the weight of this terror, to give her a break. After the girls are in their rooms for rest hour, the Americans are brought into an emergency debrief. The situation is heating up. What we had prayed wasn't going to happen was in the early stages. We were given a presentation of the situation. We go over siren protocol, and we again went over the locations of every bomb shelter on camp. I make the map of camp and its shelters with the lock screen on my phone. We're told to contact our parents and stay alert. I realize that what I was experiencing is what people in Israel grew up with, and my day of panic is nothing compared to a life of it. Hours later, my team was walking our girls to their dorms, and we're all spread apart, and I was alone with several girls, none of which have English as their first language, most of whom know no English, and I don't speak Arabic or Hebrew. We're walking through a small group of trees. I was admiring the campus and thinking of the talent show that all the kids have to get ready for, and if I should shower or not. My mind wandered to the events of the day, how tired I was, how home must be. I looked up towards the neighboring city, and a siren screams over me. It gives us only 30 seconds before a projectile hits the area. I broke into a sprint as I screamed for the girls to go to their rooms. The director of security told me earlier in the week that I could not help children to safety. I could only take care of myself. I have little to no memory of what I was thinking at that time, other than a few blips. I look down as I run and I expect a missile to hit. It's almost as if I'm looking down at myself running. I picture a missile hitting. The force of it hitting the ground will throw me forward, and the shrapnel from it will hit my back and tear through the tissue, muscle, and bone as I run, and I will be face down in the dirt, dead. I make it to my own room as the siren screamed over me. The siren felt like it lasted for barely 10 seconds. My niece hit the tile, and I covered my head with one of my hands, and I called my parents with the other, fearing that this is the last time I will talk to them. I fully expect my body to be rocked by an explosion as I hyperventilate and cry into the phone. Moments pass and we all slowly begin to peek our heads out of our rooms as we realize that no missile is hit. The rest of the coaches come to the dorms and recount our children, and all of them are gratefully in their rooms. There aren't words for how grateful I was that every kid, LIT, coach, and admin was safe. I thought back to how bad it could have gone. When people ask me about my trip to Israel, I try to sum it up, but I can't. I can't find the words to help people understand my experience. I'm still trying to process everything 2 months later. I got handed two of the most impactful days of my entire life. My view of the world and the concept I thought I knew so well had changed, and I didn't even know it at the time. I still can't fully comprehend all of it. I'm alright with that though. I'm okay with not understanding what it is like to grow up in a war zone. The day of terror I had brought me closer to understanding the lives of teenagers in Israel, but I still can't fully understand their lives. So, here I am, 2 months later, back home. I'm not scared anymore. I was lucky enough to come home, to a place that I'm always safe. Now the kids I coach, the LITs and coaches I work besides, could be in school. They also could be hiding in shelters. I will never, ever be able to relate to that, and neither will any of you. All I have now is the empathy that the experience gave me. I decided to talk to you today for you to understand how lucky we are and to understand the privileges you have been given as an American.